We have breaking news, a mass shooting at a country music concert on the Las Vegas Strip.
A gunman with automatic weapons opening fire from the 32nd floor of Mandalay Bay.
159 is coming from like the 50th or 60th floor north of the Mandalay Bay. It's coming out a window.
You are listening to Hidden Truth, Las Vegas Shooter with Jim Breslow. Find us at hiddentruthshow.com and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Hidden Truth Show. Here's Jim Breslow.
Welcome back to Hidden Truth Las Vegas Shooter. We've got a new episode of Las Vegas Shooter for you. This is primarily in light of the anniversary that all of you are aware of. I'm sure October 1st will be the 1-year anniversary of the shooting. So we're dropping this episode today. We're also going to drop another one next week. This week, we've got a great guest, and I think this episode is all about paying homage to the citizen journalists who've been out there covering the Las Vegas shooting when the mainstream media dropped the ball on it. And there's a big community on YouTube and on our Facebook page, etc. So many of you have probably seen the name Ron Burgundy. He's done 135 videos on YouTube following every intimate detail of the shooting. He's read everything that's come out from Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, gone through the body cam videos, etc. So he's really done amazing work to help the rest of us in covering the story. Also, next week, we'll be covering the events that were taking place in Las Vegas. A lot of you may be familiar with the man that goes by the name of Sleep Dep, a.k.a. Chris. We're sending him out to Vegas to cover everything going on, and we're going to get a report from Mr. Sleep Dep next week about all the goings-on in Vegas on Monday. Let me cover for you some of those things that are going on for the people that are going to be in Vegas for this very important 1-year anniversary of the shooting. There's going to be a sunrise remembrance ceremony on October 1st. And there's going to be Clark County firefighters, Metropolitan Police officers, officials from Vegas Strong Resiliency Center. They're hosting a 6:30 a.m. ceremony at the Clark County Government Center Amphitheater. And that's at 500 South Grand Central Parkway. That's 6:30 a.m. at the Clark County Government Central Amphitheater. That'll be the first remembrance of the day. There's going to be a dedication ceremony at the Las Vegas Healing Garden. That's a new remembrance wall dedication. It begins at 6:30 p.m. That's located at 1015 South Casino Center Boulevard. They say that the Strip Marquee tribute on October 1st will begin at 10:01. It'll include properties throughout the Las Vegas Valley. The Welcome to Fabulous Las Vegas sign will go dark at 10:01 p.m. on October 1st. There'll be a reading of the 58 name ceremony on October 1st. The name of each victim will be read at the Las Vegas Healing Garden. That's at that 1015 South Casino Center Boulevard. That tribute will begin at 10:05 p.m., the moment the 2017 attack began. And there'll be lots of officials there from Metro and various charities, etc. So it's going to be a sad day in Vegas and a day of remembrance, but a day of Vegas strong and resilience, as evidenced in part by the tremendous work that their hockey team did last year. They played an exhibition game on October 1st. They had a tremendous ceremony at their opening game and went on to play in the Stanley Cup and really became the face of Vegas Strong for the city of Las Vegas and getting past this. And then next week, as I said, we're going to be having additional interviews and coverage of that day. I was in Vegas last week doing a show about the 1-year anniversary. It's done by Eric Bolling's new show called America on CRTV. It is available now. If you go to crtv.com, you do have to subscribe. If you want to see a clip from that, you can go to our YouTube channel and you'll see a clip from that. But Eric Bolling's got a great new show, and he did a really cool 1-year anniversary show that I was very happy to be part of. And before we get to the interview, I want to talk about another podcast that has been covering the Las Vegas shooting. I appeared on it a couple months ago. He's been great about promoting our show, and I want to promote his and suggest that you guys check it out. It's The Confessionals. It's hosted by Tony Merkel. It's a paranormal podcast, but occasionally it does cover various alleged conspiracies. So he did a really incredible episode a few weeks ago on September 11th. He aired an interview with the former CIA asset, Susan Lindauer, and she discloses that she and also our government knew leading up to that fateful day. She discloses what she knew leading up to that fateful day and what happened to her post 9/11 that resulted in her being jailed under the Patriot Act. You can also check out the episodes that he did on the Las Vegas shooting. Episode 38, called Mandalay Bay, The Untold Eyewitness Stories. Episode 55, called Mandalay Bay, What Happens in Vegas Gets Erased in Vegas. And episode 62, The Room Under Stephen Paddock. So you can check out all that at The Confessionals. He, of course, is on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, etc., wherever you listen to podcasts. That's The Confessionals. And Tony's a great guy and had me on his show a few weeks, so I want to give a shout out to him. Okay, so here we are with our episode with Ron Burgundy, which really goes through in detail all of these allegations and all of this evidence of multiple shooters, and we try to figure it out and still move forward and trying to figure out what really happened that night, because we still really don't know. There is a large group of people that have been tracking the Las Vegas shooting now for quite a long time, a big online community, primarily on YouTube, and I know you've done over 100 videos on YouTube following this, and there's quite a community that's been built up there trying to figure out, much as this show has been trying to do, what really happened that night, because there are so many mysteries about it. But let's start by having you tell us just what interested you in this subject to begin with.
Well, what really got me interested in this subject was obviously waking up that Monday morning and seeing what had happened. And then I had made my way to YouTube and watched a few videos. And there's a video out there that was put out by the company Live Leak. And it was a video recorded from basically right there in the kill zone of the concert there in the front row. And it had a lot of victims in it and whatnot. And it just really, like everyone else in this community, it just hit me close to my heart. And I just felt so bad. I started reading more about it, watching more about it, and that's when the questions started popping up, the things that didn't make sense to me. And it's all really sprouted from there. I'm an IT guy in real life, and so I'm very regimented as far as I need answers to questions generally. I need A plus B equals C, and that's where I went, and I couldn't make it add up, and I'm really still not completely added up correct.
And when you say community, what community are you talking about?
Well, I mean the YouTube community. It's like you said, it's a big community out there on YouTube that's following this. It's getting smaller every day, but yeah, that's a pretty tight knit community out there that we're all just looking and investigating the best we can and trying to get answers.
But have you ever been fascinated with an event like this before?
No, not really. I mean, I'm a big JFK guy, but I'm not a conspiracy theorist by nature. No, but not by any means. Yeah, I never dealt with YouTube prior to this shooting. Not really. Not in any capacity. And
regarding JFK, what really happened?
Well, yeah, that's a loaded question. Who knows? Yeah, I think it seems he actually went against the wrong people to me, is what I think. But that's another whole story. But
is that the military-industrial complex, or is that the mafia, or what is
well,
that?
Yeah, it's like he said do not be deceived by I forget how he worded it, but yeah, he went against somebody. Someone did not like him saying what he was saying. So that's my personal opinion, but I don't think it was just Oswald. No.
So you go by the name Ron Burgundy on YouTube, and why is it that you feel the need to use a alias?
Well, as I said, I never was on YouTube prior to this event, and when I started, I had to have a screen name to access some of the videos because of the age restrictions. So I created an account. I just created the most outlandish name I could think of. I'm a big Will Ferrell fan. Just made the name, and started watching videos. I never planned on making videos. And as I started making them, I started getting more popular and people started watching, and now I'm kind of stuck with the name. I'd love to change it, but it's kind of hard at this point.
Well, you must be a big fan of the movie.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm a huge Will Ferrell fan.
So you're carrying the flag proudly.
Hey, I do.
Now, what did you said age restriction. What do you mean?
YouTube will place age restrictions on graphic videos, with or without you doing it. Sometimes they'll just place it on you, or the creator can place an age restriction on it too, which requires you to have a YouTube account to be able to view it.
I see. In other words, you were restricting viewership of your videos to a certain age.
Well, no. Yeah, that's what I do now, yes. But when I started watching, a lot of the videos I wanted to watch required you to prove you were 18 and have a login. So that's the reason I created Mr. Burgundy.
I gotcha.
So, but yeah, never intended to end up in the point I'm at now. So,
So from the get-go, what was your opinion about the shooting?
Well, nothing. There was a lot of inconsistencies, obviously. And I still think there's a ton of inconsistencies. It's like everywhere I looked, nothing made sense to me. It just wasn't, I don't know. I couldn't just, easily say, the 1 + 2 = 3 with anything I looked at. I started with the live leak video, started identifying the victims in that. And then that arose me to questions. I started looking at the room leaked photos, and that brought up a bunch of questions. And, that's just, with every release the LVMPD puts out, it creates more questions than it does answers anything to me. And it's really, it's bothersome is what it is. It's really bothersome.
Yeah, well, that's precisely what led us to do the deep dive into the shooting, because we were months out at the time that we started it, and it was just unbelievable to me that we could have the largest mass shooting in American history and know so little and have so many questions and have so many things not add up. So we're on the same page in that regard. But
Correct.
I do have to say, over time, as we've covered it and as more things have come out, and now the second police report, etc., things are, in my view anyway, starting to come together toward an answer. And in my opinion, it is pointing to lone wolf shooter, acting alone,
Right.
no apparent conspiracy. As far as terrorism goes, the ISIS thing is certainly very suspicious as far as them claiming responsibility when they really have never been proven wrong when they have claimed responsibility. But, we're not seeing really much beyond that as far as ISIS connection. So where things are kind of lying for me is, starting to come into focus that we've got a guy who really snapped, perhaps over a long period of time. But as far as the loss of money and so on, and being a narcissist and perhaps a psychopath like his father, and perhaps wanting to outdo his father, etc. So look, it's never easy to find a solid explanation for something this bizarre, because how could you ever explain something this bizarre, or why somebody would do something this bizarre? But unfortunately,
Correct.
We've got lots of events in the country's past of people doing unbelievable and bizarre things, and this simply may be another. So that's where I've been seeing things going. Where are you seeing things going in your analysis of this?
Well, I can admit, I started off, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being tinfoil hat, 0 being, lone shooter. I probably started off somewhere in the middle, and then I slowly started working my way to 0. I'll be the first to admit it. And because everything, things did, like you say, come into view a little better. And then we started getting the data dumps. And the one thing that really changed the way I was feeling was when we got all the 911 calls. And I released a video about the 911 calls, and it's not about the individual calls. It was just strictly about statistics of the calls. And once I was able to, put a number and quantify what we were hearing in the calls and how many we heard and the order they released them, it really brought up more questions for me. and what I mean by that is the first week they released like 500 calls, and then I noticed in those 500 calls there was a 15-minute time segment that no calls were brought out. It was from 11:15 to 11:30. Not a single call was in that 15-minute block. We had at least 30 in every other block, every other 15-minute increment, but none was in that. The following week, Lombardo gets elected. That Wednesday, he releases another set of 500 calls. And then here comes all the 11:15 to 11:30s in there. But they're all mixed together. There's no timestamp. I mean, there's timestamps on them, but they weren't in any order when they released them. So what I did was I started going through them and documenting them and putting the timestamp on where they were from and a brief description about each call. And I got to noticing between 11 and 12 that night when, as you know, there was a lot of reports of gunfire up and down the strip. The numbers I came up with were just astronomical to me to be purely by chance. In any given set of numbers, the statistics are just way too high compared to what we should have been seeing. I know a certain amount of those calls came in were from panic, but I don't believe we see as much panic. I mean, we see as many calls as we had. And what I'm getting at, just to kind of put numbers in your head, between 11 p.m. and 12 a.m. that night, there were 626 calls that came into LVMPD. Of those 626, 257 of them were reporting an active shooter or panic at another hotel. So that's 41% of the calls reporting panic, okay? Of those 257 calls, 77 of them actually said to the operator, I heard gunshots. Not my friend heard gunshots, not we think we heard, I heard gunshots. 77. It's 30% of the callers claiming there was shooting going on. 30% of them claimed to have heard the shots. And there was a real consistency on the number of shots they claimed to have heard. It was anywhere from 2 to 4 was the most common numbers. And like I say, I just broke it down in a straight statistical look at it. And I find it hard to just write off 77 individual people that have claimed to have heard gunshots. There's no doubt a certain amount of them were wrong and panicked, but
yeah. Well, and I've seen that video, and everybody should check out that video where you really break down the numbers. And we thank you for spending all the time that you did to track those calls and listen to all those calls. And so let's talk in a little bit more detail about them. So when we talk about the 77 phone calls, this is somebody calling 911 saying that they heard gunshots. Tell us what kind of pattern you see within those 77. In other words, are they mostly coming from a particular location, et cetera?
No, it's very much patterned in the actual calls. Not and what's happened is when you had one call come in, they originally started off, the first one you really got to hearing was New York, New York. And when the first call came in from New York, New York, you would see 15 more calls come in from New York, New York within the next 3 minutes. Then you would get a call from the Bellagio. And then within, 15 more calls right behind it coming from the Bellagio. So once you got the calls weren't spread out based on hotels. Once you got a hotel on the hook, you started getting all the calls from that hotel. And so I was thinking maybe that is just panic radiating up the strip. But I've also charted those calls too, charted the 77 calls and put their location, and I broke it down in a 10-minute increment of that hour. And there's no real rhyme or reason to the pattern of it going up the strip. Like, I'd like to see all the calls from 11 to 11:10 being at the Tropicana, New York area, but they're not. There's some of those are up farther at the Aria or the Bellagio. So there's really no pattern of radiating up the strip. And that's what's really bothered me the most. I was almost worked my way back all the way to Paddock, maybe was the lone gunman until these 911 calls came out and the random order they released it. And I still don't know. It still may be panic. I find it hard to believe. And I have a close personal friend that was in Planet Hollywood that night that, swears on his children. He smelled gun smoke and heard gunshots at about 11:05 that night. And that's, over 1.5 miles away from the Mandalay Bay. Mm-hmm. So.
Okay, and people are going to want to hear these calls, so we're going to make sure that we have them up on our website so that people can hear these calls. So what would be your theory as to why there was 77 reports of someone hearing gunshots in the 11 o'clock hour when Paddock stopped shooting at 10:15?
Well, yeah, that's the answer everyone I would really like, because I don't have a theory for it. It doesn't make sense. There's no reportings of casings anywhere. No one was injured. I get all that. There is no evidence to suggest anything happened other than these 911 calls and actual witness accounts of what's going on. There's also several very believable people that gave interviews during that time or about that time that there again it really comes down to what do you believe or not. And I don't know what happened in that hour, but I do believe something happened. Some people will say, oh, those gunshots were the rotating door at Bellagio making a loud whacking noise, or it was chair rails or guardrail things falling over inside the Bellagio. I don't know. I just find it hard to believe, there's one lady that's real famous about it, Miss Renee Downs. Her husband was a career Marine, and he heard the shots. He says he did. I just can't believe a Marine would identify hearing shots wrong, but anything's possible. But that combined with the other 77 people that all say they heard shots, it's really hard to believe. It's hard to get my head around it.
Well, in your YouTube community of people that have been following this religiously and intensely, what are some of the theories that they're putting out there regarding this?
It ranges from it's a full spectrum, and I'm by no means, I'm if anything closer to the lone shooter than it was all done by ISIS for sure. There's crazy thoughts that people, some of the theories that put forth that, in that 11 o'clock hour, maybe that was a distraction to try to draw police away from the hotel. Sometimes I've heard people say, maybe that was blanks and, maybe this, maybe that, a distraction, I guess I could believe. I mean, I really have no good answer of what it could have been. We have one of the gentlemen that was, went on Jason Goodman's show, Joe was talking about, he saw shell casings in the Tropicana parking lot, and at about 11:15 or so, I believe. And, we had a lot going on in that hour too. Not only is it the panic being reported all over the strip, if you look at the different events that happened in that 1 hour, wow, there's a whole lot of going on, just between the breach and, the guy seen running across the valet at the valet roof at the Tropicana. There's so much going on in that time. It's really hard for me to believe that it's all just panic, And for me, one of the more believable calls that you hear reports is not a 911 call at all. It come across the scanner. Medics were reporting taking gunshots outside the Tropicana, and these are medics. So, I mean, I don't take it for what it's worth. That's pretty believable to me. So, but I don't know what happened. I mean, No one does.
Well, and you've been critical of Lombardo. We've been critical of Lombardo and the police handling of this and how they've released information.
Absolutely.
Our audience, I'm sure, is aware that what you've been referring to, these data dumps that they've been doing once a week pursuant to the court order, and rather than putting them out in some method that makes sense and explained with a table of contents and some context to everything, they just been dumping stuff, causing it, forcing everybody to sift through it on their own.
Right.
But within all that, that's where you've been able to find tons of phone calls, not just in the 11 o'clock hour, I'd imagine in the 10 o'clock hour.
Oh, yeah, they're everywhere. Absolutely. I concentrated most of mine on that 11 o'clock hour, but no, there's crazy calls up and down, and there's crazy calls at 2 a.m. that night. So
there's been all that information released. A couple of questions. One, have the police anywhere in the police report and any of their press conferences acknowledged any shots being fired by anyone other than Paddock and the couple shots in the Mandalay Bay?
No, the only other shot claimed by anyone is the accidental gunshot of the SWAT team member inside the room.
Right.
So yeah, that's the only one.
But I don't think that we've ever gotten a nice, good, adequate explanation from the police department regarding all these calls. In other words, for them to come forward and explain to us, they're the ones getting the 911 calls. They're the ones presumably responding to the 911 calls. What about reports of those responses and what was found or not found?
Exactly, some follow-up information. It's almost like the LVMPD is a little pissed off that they were forced to give this information, so they're going to make it as hard on us or as hard on anybody to put it all back together, and they're not just keeping their mouth shut. They're not going to give any help whatsoever, and that's really not what you want with a police department in the largest mass shooting in U.S. history. You want some transparency there, and they're really providing none, and it's very, very suspect, and they're creating a lot of this. If they would have dumped half this stuff out on October 6th, I think a lot of this would have been dead by now.
Yeah.
And, but they didn't. They created a lot of this on themselves. And, it is what it is at this point. It's grown legs, and it's going to run for a long time.
Yeah, I think that it's very unfortunate. Lombardo didn't handle it well at the beginning, which is understandable. He made some mistakes, but that doesn't mean that you clam up and your solution to the fact that you made some early errors means that you don't talk in the future.
Right.
But that seems to be where he's gone, is that
exactly where they've gone.
Yeah, he's going to go in the opposite direction. And so now we're left with survivors, local residents, people like you and me following this, having all these unanswered questions, which, the only people that can help us answer these are the police, the guys that responded to all these calls.
Absolutely. I mean, there's, a good example of that is like the guy that was arrested wearing fatigues and ran into an RV, and he was arrested that night in the 11 o'clock hour. They never mentioned that. They haven't followed up on anything as far as I know. I mean, there's just, and they're not even giving, any of the media a chance to ask questions. Not that the media is asking questions.
Have you gone through everything that has been released?
Well, no, I would not say everything. There's a lot of the body cams I haven't watched in these last few releases.
What about the police reports?
Police reports, yes. I've read everything at least once.
All of the individual reports that were
absolutely
filed.
All the statements and all that good stuff.
So do any of those statements cover responding to a 911 call regarding a shooting, say at New York, or Bellagio?
I don't recall one. No, not off the top of my head. Most of the witness statements were all just from people at the event and what they thought took place. I don't recall any just off the top of my head that talk about like a follow-up, or an arrest being made or something of that nature. A good example of something I've tried to find that's not out there is, are you familiar with who Melissa Ramirez is? The lady that was deceased in the warehouse parking lot for an hour? Are you familiar with that video that I'm talking about?
No. Why don't you explain it to our listeners?
Okay. One of the victims of the event, her name was Miss Melissa Ramirez. Another YouTube channel out there named 5x5 News, Mike Turber, he went and got this footage from a private company's warehouse video. It had a camera mounted on the back of the warehouse. This camera was mounted perfectly where you can see the tanks, you can see towards the venue kind of. And in this video, Miss Ramirez is actually drug up in the video. They stay with her for a little bit, and then they leave her. And she lays in that parking lot deceased for over an hour. Cops come by a couple times and check on her and leave her. And this video is one that I don't know how the FBI or whoever was covering this didn't find. Mike at 5x5 got this video, on October 23rd because he went to the company and asked them for it. The police department never even checked with them to say, hey, is this camera on? Was it recording? Turns out that's one of the biggest videos of the event. If I had to name 5 top videos from this event, that's one of them. It captures a whole lot of information in that video. And that poor lady laid there dead for a long time all by herself. And it's pretty sickening. It's really sickening.
And ultimately, do you see her being picked up and taken away?
Yes, ultimately, I think it's starting to get close to midnight. A private citizen, I mean, it's probably one of the cops' trucks, comes and loads her into a truck, not a police unit, but a truck, and they load her up and take her off.
And how do we know for sure who that is?
Just from research, and everybody just know at this point we've identified who it was, and we just I don't know who officially put it all together, who it was, but I've just always known it to be her when the video came out, and everything matches. So
wow, has her family made any statement about that?
Not that I'm aware of them. There was a memorial when I went to Vegas in February to a protest of the LVMPD, and when I went at that point, there was a big memorial set up at that location for Miss Ramirez. So yeah, I don't think there's any doubt that was her in the video itself, but it's a very hard video to watch. There's no doubt about it. So
well, we'll make sure that video is available on our website also for people to see. As sad as that is, that's the first time I've heard that story. So just literally left there by herself.
Yes, she was drug up by two males, drug her up and stayed with her for a little bit, and then they left. And you've literally got people walking by her, looking over at her, going, "Oh my gosh, keep on walking." And she laid there for well over an hour by herself.
Well, we have fortunately an opposite story that we told. We had Heather Goose on. Was one of our first episodes where she actually stayed with a gentleman that was a complete stranger to her. But she stayed with him for well over an hour. But gosh, I'm not recalling the story, but I think it was a couple hours where she stayed with a stranger. He was dead, but she stayed with him because she didn't want him to be alone.
Right. Yeah. There's several stories of that out there talking to survivors, and yeah, that was when I saw that video, it just killed me. You hate that it went down and it happened to her in that nature. It's just sad. It's
because the most of the takeaway stories are very, very positive. I mean, you mostly hear only great things about the way people conducted themselves there in helping each other and so on. I mean, you've got some trampling, but that's going to happen in any crowded environment like that.
Generally, a situation like that does bring out the best in humanity, and then there's many examples of it that night. And I don't want to sound like I'm totally bashing the LVMPD. I think the body cams show many heroes on that force that night. There was a lot of cops that did a lot of good things that night, but it is what it is as far as the powers to be. I mean, that their organization does not have the best history overall to begin with, so this didn't help it any.
Yeah, I know. I agree with you. Tons of heroics. It's caught on film. We've seen it by Las Vegas police and also the concert goers. And being a country music fan myself, I'd like to say that it was in part the type of people that go to country music concerts, I think, tend to be very upstanding individuals, and they proved it that night. Now, one individual who didn't kind of live up to expectations, you would probably agree, is Officer Hendricks on the 31st floor, listening to the massacre one floor above him for over 4 minutes.
Yeah, that was hard to watch. I mean, that's no one can say for sure how they would react in a situation like that, but he had the absolute worst reaction you could have. I mean, he was sworn to uphold the law and protect citizens, and if nothing else, his own friends were out there. He could have done something. I mean, something he should and could have, but he didn't. And he not only did he not do anything, he prevented 4 other people from doing anything, or 3 other people from doing anything as well, because they were all following his lead.
Yeah, and I believe they were armed. These were armed guards that he was with, so it wasn't, as Lombardo said in one interview, "Oh, well, you don't bring a knife to a gunfight," as an excuse for his officer doing that. Yeah, it's like, well, first of all, when the guy with the gun is massacring hundreds of people, yes, you do bring a knife. You bring whatever you got.
Right.
But he had a lot more than that. He had a bulletproof vest on himself to begin with.
Right.
And a gun, and a fellow officer, and a couple security guards with guns.
Exactly. And the security guards looked like they wanted to go ahead. They were actually, if you watch that video, one of them's in front of him going down the hall, like, come on. And, I firmly believe they could have gone in the stairwell and gone up to that floor and still been in with plenty of cover and just, made noise, shot a couple rounds into the door, anything, something to just draw his attention away.
Yeah.
Because at that point, they didn't know it was about to end. Even though it was about to end, they didn't know that. He could have made it last a lot longer. So does that mean, would they have stayed there in that, hallway paused for if it lasted another 10 minutes? I'd say probably, yeah, sadly. So.
Yeah. Well, and Lombardo has done nothing but make excuses for it, and also delayed the release of that video also till after the election.
Right. A long time after the election. Yeah, it was.
He really comes out of this looking like quite a despicable person, and I'm sure you're as astounded as we are that he got reelected.
I can't believe that. If you remember in one of his earlier interviews before the release is coming out, he actually made the quote, said something like, "I don't want you to jump to conclusions when you see these body cams." I think that video is what he was referencing, because he knew one of his officers failed to take action, and I think that's what he was referencing.
I think it's one of the reasons why the timeline was so screwed up.
Right.
Because they were trying to mask the truth, which was we were there. We were in position to stop this.
And we did.
And it wasn't stopped. So they were playing around with that timeline like crazy in the early stages. The other thing, there's a few outstanding mysteries that keep popping up high on my list. I'm curious your thoughts about the fact that it took the police over an hour before they blew the door down.
Right.
I still can't figure out why they were so meticulous and careful and slow and methodical in going through these floors and clearing these floors and this and that. We highlighted on our YouTube channel the video of one of the officers who wound up being one of the first in the room taking a piss in a bathroom and taking time to wash his hands after going to the bathroom. It's like, how do these guys have enough time to be going to the bathroom and then washing their hands when you've got a quote-unquote active shooter situation? They did not know that Paddock had killed himself. In fact, you can tell they didn't know by the way they act when they are going to blow the door. These guys have some very serious looks on their face. They are tense. They don't know what's behind that door. So you don't know what's behind the door. You don't know how many people are behind the door. Yeah, he stopped shooting, but they could start the shooting up at any time. Why did it take them over an hour to breach that door?
No, I agree. And the gentleman you're talking about, Officer David Newton. He's the one that took that, piss heard around the world, so to speak. And to me, that was the first time I was watching all those body cam releases. Is I was just screaming at my computer, "What are you waiting for?" I couldn't process how slow and methodical, like you said, how they were coming about this. How can they be going this slow? Yes, I know they hadn't heard shots in a while, but they had no idea, apparently, if you believe that it was done. It almost seemed like maybe they did know he was down. And that's what's created a lot of these crazy controversies, because, I'd like to say, yeah, they didn't know that, but I can't defend that because of their actions in those body cams. There's every indication in those body cams to me makes me think that they thought the shooter was down and done.
Yeah.
There's no hurry at all.
Yeah. One thing I've heard, but maybe you could speak to this having gone through all the videos, is that did it take them that long to get the breach materials that they needed, the explosives to take down the door?
No. Levi Hancock had it on him, and he had it unwound, ready to go in 5 seconds. It seemed like, he had that ready in the hallway. It's just like tape material, breach, the thing they used for that breach, and he just rolled it out, set a charge, and placed it and went. No, it wasn't that at all. I don't know why they took them so long. I understand clearing the rooms down that particular hallway. I don't know why they even bothered going in the 135 suite, one floor below where he took that piss. Why are you going in there? Get up to where, even if you knew he was down, get on up there and secure the site, secure the crime scene.
Yeah.
And that's what's amazing to me.
Well, they would have, Hendricks may have blood on his hands, but man, the entire police force would have had blood on their hands if Paddock he had been alive and opened fire again.
If he was still alive in that room, he could have mowed them down. They were standing right there in that hallway across from room 134. I mean, they were taking no precautions. I mean, I wouldn't have been anywhere in the open. If someone was in the 134 room, he could have shot right through the door and got every one of them standing in the stairwell. Mm-hmm. It's like they weren't taking precautions of that. It's almost like they had foreknowledge of what was on the other side of the door. I mean, and I can't make an argument against it, and that drives me crazy, because I do believe Paddock is guilty. Don't get me wrong. I believe Paddock is guilty of sin. I just I don't know if he had help or not. I suspect he did. He had help in some degree. I don't think he was. I think he was alone in that room from at least 10, 12 on. There's no doubt about that. You know, we had eyes on that room, and all escape routes were covered from 10, 12 on.
Well, and even beyond that, Doug Papa, who we've had on the show, I noticed he just posted something new for the first time, where he's confirming that he was alone in the room the entire time based on the lock interrogation reports, based on when the doors were locked and when they were unlocked. He starts from a vantage point of when you go into the room, what they found is what they found. The body cams are there. They're clear.
Right.
One person was found. It was Paddock. Okay.
Right.
If you follow the lock reports from the room, you would see that no one else could have gotten into that room based on the lock reports prior to that. So he feels it's 100% confirmed that Paddock was the only one in that room from the time that firing started.
Go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, actually, I know the lock reports very well, and I would disagree with his assertion on that. I think the lock reports show a very odd manipulation of the locks 30 minutes prior to it all starting. I can't definitively say what was going on, but there's something weird. I would encourage you to look at the lock reports yourself and plot them out when everything's taking place. And if it was just Paddock, the guy was doing some weird stuff in the hallway, going in and out, closing, shutting. It's awful strange. But, you know, I go back to he was alone from 10, 12 on. I don't think.
Well, perhaps Papa doesn't bother to dig into it prior to the final locking, because he's saying, look, bottom line, if this is the last time that they were locked, and then the next is the breach, and there's one guy in there, then how could there have been more guys?
And that is very much accurate. The last time it was locked was well before the shooting started. Yes, it was. And there again, I don't doubt that at all. There's no doubt that no one got out of that room from 10, 12 on. It just wasn't a way. But it almost looks like to me in those lock reports that he was with someone before it. But that's just strictly speculation.
Well, you would say as recently as 30 minutes before the shooting. Based
Correct.
on your examination of the lock reports, it seems like more than one person.
It really does, yes. And based on the findings of another YouTuber that I run with all the time, UFO UK Hunter. UFO Hunter UK. It's another YouTuber that's out there. He's really dug into this. He's gone as far as contact the lock manufacturer and find out where the mechanism inside the lock, where it lives and how it actually reports back to this system. And there's a lot of manipulation of those locks. Right before, prior to the shooting. But no, once it was finally thrown, I think it's 9:36 and 9:46, I think, on the two doors. And they never open again until the breach.
Okay, so that's something that you're suspicious of that indicates perhaps he had help. What other things can you point to that tell you that you think he had help?
Well, all the explosives in the van bothers me. It just seems like an odd thing to have all that explosives in the van and not any plans to use it. So, it's, and that's where I'm so conflicted. My common sense side of me wants to believe it was just Paddock, but then I just can't answer so many questions like what you're asking me. I can't pinpoint any one thing, but just it's like when you add it all up, the collective just doesn't seem like he could have got this accomplished by himself.
Well, and one of the things it's been an obvious thing to point out from the beginning is the lack of a note, but that it's definitely yet another curious element that is unexplained, because it sure seems like he went through a lot of hassle, a lot of planning to not leave behind any indication as to why he did it.
Right. And you could make an argument, watching all the CCTV footage that the Mandalay Bay released, you could make the argument that Paddock did not look like a man that was planning on not leaving that hotel. He was very calm, cool, collected. I mean, he paid off all his debts to the hotel. So if he wanted to get back at the hotels, why would he pay debts off? It's just, there again, it just doesn't add up to the final episode of what happened. Nothing adds up to what actually happened.
Yeah.
It just,
yeah, we interviewed early in the series an expert on lone wolf shootings, and he said that he wasn't aware. He couldn't think of a case where the guy didn't leave behind some manifesto, some note, some indication as to why he did what he did.
Right.
Yeah.
It just doesn't really make that much sense, especially when you deal with someone who, apparently was a huge, egomaniac and narcissist and everything. I mean, which it seems like he was. It's almost, you want that infamy. And so, you would think he would leave something behind. I mean, I think we know all that stuff from your interview. I mean, kudos to you. You got the one interview with Bruce. I thought that interview told us a whole lot about his brother. It was great.
Yeah, great. I think most of his information was coming from Mom. I think Bruce talks to Mom a lot, and I think that's what we were getting when we talked to Bruce, is we were getting really what the mom was able to share with him. But my explanation for the no note is the shooting is the note. In other words, that is the message. That I could achieve this. That I could do this. That I'm was smart enough, capable enough to pull this off, in this very, very, very twisted narcissist's head, who also was probably some form of a psychopath. His father, we know, was a psychopath. Never got the love of his father, out to perhaps outdo his father by beating the casinos. Just like his dad used to rob banks, he's out beating the casinos. And then when he starts to lose to the casinos, apparently, he's going to beat them in this other extraordinary way. And it is pretty extraordinary. I mean, in a sick way, you'd have to say it's impressive what this guy was able to do under the nose of Mandalay Bay and MGM.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if it was really just him and he did all this all by himself with no help, I mean, the most successful mass murderer of all time. I mean, he pulled it off to perfection, other than, the tanks did not go up. But
I think you just said it right there. The most successful mass murderer of all time. I think that's the title this crazy nut job wanted. And, it does make you not want to even say his name. And we even thought about that when we first started doing the show is should we be mentioning this guy's name? I hate the idea of mentioning this guy's name, but, it's just the practicalities. It's just so hard to cover it without mentioning the name.
It's sickening. There's like I've said it from day one. Paddock was guilty of a whole lot. I mean, whether you think, whatever you want to think, what theory you want to believe, I have no doubt the man is guilty of something. And, I go back to the paying off the casinos. If you were going to get back at the casinos, why would you pay them off? That seems a little odd. Why would you stop when he did? That seems odd to me. It seems like if he was really planning on making this his big ta-da and one last stand, why not just keep shooting till all your rounds are gone? Why not, shoot a few at the Luxor right there beside him and break out all those windows? Just go haywire. He still had 5,000 rounds, so.
Yep, add that to the list of unexplained things. My little theory on that is that, he went out in an orgy of violence, and he had his orgasm. That to put it in that manner, number one. Number two, I do believe, and I might be wrong about this, but I do believe that the crowd may have been somewhat dispersed after that time. So the shooting fish in a barrel was kind of no longer the case.
Correct. And most of I firmly believe most of the victims came in the first few volleys. The later own volleys, were directed at cops here. And yeah, he didn't have a clear target at that point. That's where I would think, I guess it's saying something about me. I think I would turn to the Luxor and say, hey, how many windows can I break out real quick? And then again, he could have just been spent for firing 1,000 rounds. He was an older man, and people like to say anyone can shoot an AR-15. Okay, not anyone can shoot 1,000 rounds through an AR-15. That's ludicrous to think that and not be tired and gassed. He could have just been gassed.
I think you're probably onto something there. Yeah. And supposedly he did have back problems similar to his brother Bruce.
And I think the sound of the volleys do back that up a little bit. Because if you listen to the first few volleys, they're very regimented. So regimented, in fact, people think it's from a belt-fed weapon. But if you listen to the last couple volleys, they're very, intermittent, like you possibly could be getting tired. And I don't know if you've ever shot a bump stock. A bump stock is very hard to fire. It takes a lot of coordination, and you got to really hold on to your rifle. And if you're gassed and tired, maybe that's what you're hearing in those shots. Because it's very unorganized pattern on those last couple rounds.
Mm-hmm. And what about all the people that were absolutely, in fact, to this day, 100% convinced that were at the concert that it was multiple shooters? They said the sound of the gunshots, there's no way it was one shooter.
Well, Jim, I've talked to several survivors of this event that were in the venue, and every single one of them believes there was multiple shooters and a shooter at the event. And I've talked to several that don't want to come out and don't want to give their story because they're afraid of being chastised online. And I think there's a lot of people out there. I've said for a long time, if we ever get a smoking gun to this case, it's going to come from a private video of a survivor. And I know there's still survivors out there that has videos and has information that hasn't released it. I just released a video last week where a survivor contacted me. It's the first time anyone's seen 2 of the 3 videos I released, and they were recorded right within, I call the kill zone, the worst place to be inside the venue. And we haven't seen those in 11 months because she was afraid to come forward because she didn't want to take heat and criticism. Because what's happening is these survivors are getting it from both sides. They're getting it from the real crazy conspiracy theorists saying, oh, you're fake. It was all fake and you're lying. You're part of the cover up. And then you're getting it from the narrative guys saying, oh, you just think you heard 2 shooters. And so they're really kind of getting it from both sides. So they don't want to come out and tell anybody. And that's what we don't need. So,
yeah, well, the explanations perhaps for the hearing different shots is they're on the ground. You got tremendous echoing going on down there. Not to mention you've got microphones on stage.
Well, yeah, the
that might
PA
be
system's still on. Correct. Yeah. I firmly believe. I think when you see the survivors and victims talk about it felt like the gunshots were following me, I think it is some of the PA system picking that up and pushing it through other speakers in the venue.
Well, at the end of the day, with all this talk about additional shooters, whether it be at the time or in the 11 o'clock hour, we just don't have any evidence additional to the 911 calls or what people have said. In other words, where's the bullet holes at New York? Where are the bullet holes at Bellagio?
100% correct. There's no evidence, physical hard evidence of any other shooter but Paddock. But I can tell you, every survivor that I've talked to, I firmly believe them 100%. They believe there was another shooter in the venue. I mean, I've had some tell me as far as they've seen muzzle flash within the venue, but don't want to talk about it. And
well, the other thing missing, in my view, is okay. Let's say there were other shooters in the 11 o'clock hour. These reports were accurate. Who are these other shooters?
Right.
What is their relationship to Paddock? What is this? What was this if there were, in fact, additional shooters in the 11 o'clock hour?
Right. The bottom line, if there is something to all the claims of hearing shots between 11 and 12, and some of the deeper theories are correct, it has to be a cover-up of epic proportion. That's the only explanation, and it's deep, dark, and nefarious, and I don't even want to know about it, to be honest with you, if that's the case. Because I mean, you've got, it's not like, a lot of people talk about the helicopters, and I even point out some suspicious helicopters during that time, but there's nothing that went on that night in the air that the FAA didn't know about. So, if there is something getting covered up, you're looking at the levels that it would reach. That's scary. So, that's the only other. It's either a lone wolf or a crazy huge conspiracy.
And you're in tight with that conspiracy crowd on YouTube. Give us what they would say. What is this big, huge, crazy conspiracy?
There's a couple different theories running around. A lot of people do still think it was some sort of Saudi involvement and it was some type of an assassination attempt. Some people.
Well, let me ask you about the Saudi one, because that one was floated quite a bit, and we did cover that a little bit on the show. But the idea is that there's a Saudi prince that owns the Four Seasons, that he was staying at the Four Seasons, that then the Crown Prince was seen at the Tropicana, and that this was a hit on the Crown Prince because he was about to crack down on corruption, and in fact did, and I believe put the other prince in jail in the Ritz-Carlton jail, as they call it, in Saudi Arabia a week or two after Vegas. So, but do we even know for sure on that conspiracy theory, if you know, were those two guys actually in Vegas?
There's no proof whatsoever they were in Vegas. And the gentleman they show walking through the Tropicana is not a prince. That is a cop who was at a softball game and had went out and got his gun from his car and came back in. He was a security guard, I think, not a cop.
So he was the one that was supposed to be. He was the one who was supposed to be the Crown Prince. So you're saying that's conclusively.
Yes,
that's conclusively. Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
okay.
I don't remember his name now, but no, that's not the case. And there's no evidence whatsoever that puts anybody, MSB in Vegas that night. There's just none out there.
Either of the princes.
No, nobody.
So how did that story even start?
Well, there's crazy. I mean, but it's not just that. There's people that think it was all one big drill and a fake, totally fake. Nobody died, and they were using rubber dummies in the venue, and it's crazy.
Okay, let's bring it a little bit back down to earth. So you've debunked the Saudi theory. What would be the most commonly followed conspiracy theory that people are tracking on YouTube?
I don't know if you could really say one theory is the more common of any of the theories. I think the general consensus is we all feel like something is amiss, and we're all kind of at different levels. But I don't. Now the Saudi thing is just my opinion. I don't believe that guy coming through the Tropicana. I'm in my mind, I'm convinced that's a guard at the Tropicana. Some people will tell you right now, no, that was the prince. So it still comes down to opinion. I don't think that was the case by any means, but I don't think there's any one theory that everybody subscribes to. It's just it's a floating scale all the time. Mm-hmm. I think I kind of fall into I think they're covering up some, but given the right evidence, I could be totally convinced it's just the LVMPD in the cover your ass mode is the cover up. But given the right evidence too, I could be convinced that maybe there was something more nefarious going on. But until I get that concrete evidence, I cannot commit totally to saying, yes, there was shooting going on between 11 and 12, even though I suspect and what I see in my numbers kind of leads me that direction. I still got to go by what I can prove, and I can't prove anything.
Yeah, well, I could say regarding the reports of shootings, I compare it to when we had a big earthquake here 20 or so years ago in Los Angeles, and we had a lot of aftershocks. And it got to the point where anytime a truck went by, I thought we were having an earthquake. Because it was happening so often, you start confusing one for the other. And I think it's very possible that in the skittish environment that people were in after that shooting, I mean, it was crazy. I mean, you've talked to enough people, and so have I, to know how crazy it was. They say that, to say that this was a 10-minute event is to totally misunderstand what was going on in Vegas at that time.
Right.
This was a 3 or 4 or 5 hour event. It was madness because they just did not know. No one knew what was going on, and there was panic popping up all over the place. And so anything you're hearing that's loud at that point is sounding like a gunshot.
Right. And just the way the powers to be are handling it just adds to the problem. They're just not being, it's like the MGM not releasing their video from inside the hotel. They released it through a news organization. It's the only reason we have the CCTV footage of Paddock to begin with. The evidence is there that could be released to put a lot of these theories to bed. And I'll give you an example of that. We've got, Officer Levi Hancock, who performed the breach and was the first one in the room that night. He conveniently left his body cam off. Wasn't recording. One of his, I forget the guy's, what his position is, makes the excuse for him. Well, he didn't have it on, but he clearly has it on him from the videos. So Levi he conveniently did not turn his SWAT camera off. To this date, we have one body cam showing inside either of those two rooms when there was like 7 or 8 officers that went into that room. Just release more videos that show more in that room. Like another big conspiracy that people are really latching onto, which I don't believe, is that the glass in room 32-135 was not broken until after the shooting ended. And that's because there's no video proof showing that. There's actually a gentleman, a policeman that walks right up to the window, opens the curtains, and looks out. Where's his body cam footage? Why haven't we seen it? They could quiet a lot of the conspiracies by releasing evidence. But yet we keep getting these, 5-hour later recordings, and it's just.
Lombardo needs to be more tuned in to the fact that survivors still want more answers, and residents still want more answers, and they are still confused, and they still don't really know what happened. This is not over. Lombardo needs to come forward. Last thing I want to cover with you, because it's been one of my little fascinations from the beginning, the vase with fake flowers that Paddock buys at Walmart and brings into the room and is found in the room by the police. What the heck is that all about?
Yep, that's just one of those scratch your head moments. Where does that fit in anywhere? I don't know. The 2 body massagers that were plugged up in the suitcase. Where does that fit in? There's just so many questions, and we're never going to get the answers, I'm afraid, because the LVMPD controls the narrative of that hotel, and that we know. So I just don't understand where the rest of I want to see the actual high-resolution photos from that night, not just the ones they're dumping into these PDFs and are terrible, terrible quality. The survivors and victims need this closure. They need something, because, there's people, it's almost a year later, and, emotion is still extremely, extremely high for a lot of people. Yeah. They're going to see that this week at the reunion in Vegas. I cannot go, and it makes me sick. But they're all going out there for the anniversary on the 1st, and there's a lot of survivors going, and it's a lot of people need more. Yeah. That's for sure.
Well, it's been over 50 years since JFK's assassination, and we're still talking about that. Something tells me that in 50 years from now, people are still going to be talking about this shooting. Mr. Ron Burgundy, glad to have finally connected with you. You're doing amazing work. Keep it up, and let's stay in touch.
Thank you so much for having me on, Jim.
All right, take care.
All right.
Bye-bye. Thank you again, Ron Burgundy, for giving us your time and for all the attention that you've given to this. I know that you do it in tribute to the victims, and so do we. And October 1st coming up is the day to remember those victims, the 58, the 450 additional that were shot, the 800 or 900 or so that were injured, and all the others that still are trying to get over what they experienced that night. I was supposed to be there. I feel very fortunate that I was not there, but I feel very close to those that were, being a country music fan myself and having interviewed so many of them, that I know what they're going through, and I hope that October 1st is a day that helps them heal and move past this horrific incident that took place in Vegas. I'm Jim Breslow. Thank you for listening to Hidden Truth Las Vegas Shooter. We'll be back next week with another episode covering the anniversary.
Thank you for listening to Hidden Truth Las Vegas Shooter with Jim Breslow. Find us at hiddentruthshow.com and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Hidden Truth Show.